Steve, how's it going? Please like, subscribe if you like this, etc. I'm going to be doing a video on Wavetable today, so I'm going to be making an ambient track, or I already have made an ambient track, and I'm going to show you all the elements that I did to make it up. So I'll give you a little bit of a preview now. This is what the track is like. Ableton Wavetable. I'll just click on the triangle here to expand the view, and you can see this shows you pretty much everything that's available within the synth. We've got the basic shape wavetable loads with it, which I actually use quite a lot of the time because it's classic. Sine, triangle, saw, square, and you can do a hell of a lot with just those waveforms. But you've also got a plethora of other waves. We've got menus full of stuff here. Let's stick in the basics at the minute. I'm going to enable a second oscillator as well. And you've got a sub oscillator at the side. See, if I'm holding this down and click the sub on, there's a 1 octave underneath. We can tone this, which basically gives it harmonics. You can see the harmonics on the EQ module there as I move that up and down. And you can also make it the same, or you can make it 2 octaves down, which is some serious sub. I'll turn that off a minute. Each oscillator's got its own tuning and detune, so I can slightly detune them. And you notice when you do detune these slightly, you get a hell of a lot of movement in that waveform because you've got 2 waves that are slightly different tunings, which means that they're oscillating at different frequencies, so they start interfering with each other all the time as they're going. Now, each of these oscillators has also got its own effects section. It's either FM, classic, or modern. FM, frequency modulation, you have an amount and then a tuning, which can go down or up. Mod classic is pulse width modulation. That's the pulse width going up. And the sync. And you can go up or down with the pulse width. And then modern is warp and fold. So and you can see with all of these you get a visual representation of what's happening to the waveform. So when you've got a more complicated waveform, you get some really bizarre shapes happening up on the screen. You can also, if I click on this, you'll see it comes up in the modulation matrix. So if I just up LFO1 there, you can see that that's now modulating the warp. I can do the same with a fold. Now I've actually clicked on it or moved it, it shows up in the modulation matrix, and we'll pop that on LFO2. And they're a little bit fast at the minute, so we'll pop them down. And we can do the same here with wave 2. Let's go for classic, go with the pulse width, sync, and with the pulse width, I'll mop it there, but I'll go backwards. I'll go to a minus figure so it's going the opposite direction, and I'll do the same with the sync for oscillator for LFO1. All of a sudden we've got loads of movement going on in those, and we can also do the same with the envelope. So your amplitude envelope, same as any synth. It's actually a go-to thing for any synthesizer you use because that changes everything. If I knock that decay right down, the sustain down, we go from the pluck sound, we pop that up, pop the K up, pop that up, to a pad sound. The ADSR, the attack, decay, sustain, release, is the most important function of any synthesizer. It dictates pretty much the whole feel of the sound. Likewise with the filter section, you've got another 2 envelopes that you can map to anything. So if I map that one there, we'll drag the sustain right down, the release to nothing. And if I use envelope 2 then, if I drag here, oscillator 1 position, we'll pop envelope 2 up on that. And you can see that position moving upwards and back down again. But I'm going to loop that. So that's going to move up and down, and then it's going to go again, it's going to loop the whole thing. If I do the same with envelope 3, I'll loop that. We'll do a very similar type of thing, but a bit slower. And then we'll put envelope 3 onto oscillator 2 position. Now you notice down here in the EQ we've got quite a lot going on in the low end, so I'm going to just enable a second filter, which these are by default. You can select the shape of them, but by default you've got high pass and low pass. So I'm just going to pop that up there, so we're taking out that muddy bottom end there, which is going to cause a problem. It's similar in quite a few synths. Operator's really bad for it as well. You've got to just take out that bottom end. So we got quite a rich sound there just by using the LFOs and the envelopes to mess around with the sound shapes. With the filter, we can also use it to change the filter. So for example, I will take filter 1 frequency there, and I'm going to use envelope 2. And you can see that that's just increasing. And you can see in the EQ what's happening there. That's just going up and down and making the sound a lot richer. We've also got the same options in the filters here if you want to add a little bit of dirt to it. If you want to make that a PRD, just put the drive up a little bit. Adds harmonics, adds a little bit of analog feel, more analog feel to the sound, because these are analog modelled synths. There's a load you can do within that modulation matrix. For example, as well with filter 1 frequency, we can make that so if I put note up to 100%, wherever I play, I have the exact same amount of filter, rather than it being stuck at a particular frequency. So wherever I play on the keyboard, it's going to have the same amount of harmonics from there. So the other thing we've got here as well is we've got the volume with polyphonic, monophonic, and we've got a fantastic unison module here. So I'm going to pop that on whilst I play a chord. We'll put classic on. Get your voices. We've got shimmer, noise. I think this is my favourite. You'll see me using this a lot soon. Phase sync, position spread, and random note. Now if I grab this, group it, and in the chain list I'm going to duplicate, and in this duplicated one I'm just going to drag a few of these things different directions just to create a slightly different sound. And I'm going to enable a shimmer, pop that right up with 8 voices. I'll take that one off. I'm going to duplicate this again, but I'm going to pop a different unison on it. I'll put phase sync on it. And what we'll do, we'll turn those off. And we'll just mix it. So we've created very easily, with only basic waveforms, this really nice moving pad. And once you've got that, you can start playing around and say, right, you know, I'm going to take the retro. Take saw dual one there. We'll take another retro one, we'll make it resonant too. Pop a reverb on that. Let's grab the Valhalla. I'll put the Supermassive on it because it's a free reverb. Shoulder line. And you've got your way to instant ambient goodness. So I'll jump into the track and have a little run through a few of the things. Hope this gives you a good overview on Wavetable and hopefully pushes you to start experimenting with it, because it's, I say, it's a beautiful synthesizer. It sounds absolutely amazing. So here's the track. I'll play you a few little snippets of it. I have an opening section with an arpeggio, noise synth going on. We've got a little bit more happening here. We have a breakdown. And then everything comes back up again here. And then we're all coming in later on. So I'll run through what I've done with it, and then the other thing is I kind of need to mix down, so I'm going to try and do a mix down video for next week at some point and show what I'm doing to it, because it's a bit messy. There's things bleeding into each other and everything hasn't got its own space. So I'm quite happy with what I've got as a whole, but it needs work doing to it. So I've got a kick here, which I'll link to the tutorial I actually did to get an 808 kick in Ableton. It's a tuned kick because I'm using a basic sine wave. It's opening wavetable. You'll see that I've got pitch mapped to envelope 2. So that is making the simulation of when you hit with the beater on the bass drum, you get a pitch drop from that initial hit. So you get a click and a drop, which is what's happening here. And then envelope 3 is got the frequency, the filter 1 frequency. You can see that's sort of, it's going very quickly, so it does, sometimes it shows it, sometimes it doesn't. And we've got a lot of things mapped to it as well. So I don't really use these on here, but you could use low frequency cut. You've got a sustain on there, so you can get that really deep 808 kick sound. I've put this through a basic patch, clip slap analog with the Ableton Echo, and I'm just rolling off a little bit of low end. So I've got a hat. All I used for this was just white noise. I haven't got much else going on. I've got oscillator 1 positions being modulated there in the matrix, just to change up the sound a little bit, and it's going through an echo unit. And I've just got that curve there where I've accentuated that frequency there around 5 kilohertz, just to give it a little bit of a hat sound to it. I've got a sort of snare patch. Now, I say sort of snare because it's not really a snare, so you can hear a little bit of noise on that, and I'm going to show you what that is. It's CB here, even. This is called noisy echo. So that thing you can hear going left to right is actually, we've got 52% on the noise here with a threshold set, so it's not constant noise. And it gives this sort of weird noisy thing going on for the left to right. I've also got a percussive sound. This is very similar to what I did with the snare. Both of them, well, all the sounds on here are using heavy use of the amplitude envelope. Just we've got a no release, really low decay time, because if I pop that decay up, it changes the nature of the sound completely. I've got a second running, and you can see I'm using this sort of more random LFO on both of the waves there, and I'm doing quite a few things with the effects and with the position, like I showed you before in the video leading up to this. Now all of those things are actually being routed to a drum bus, and on the drum bus I've got the Sound Toys Devil Lock, and I've got the Ableton Saturator for warm-up lows. I'll play without, and then with. So I'm adding some grit, some real analog stuff there. Turn off the Devil Lock. They're both doing their own little thing on it. If I pop up now to the bass, this bass sound here is using the detuning like I showed you before, because I've only got two, all three of these have got exactly the same setting, where we have just got a 2 cent detune on the second oscillator. And what that does, if I go over to the EQ and play that, it sends a ripple throughout the whole sound. I don't have to do anything effect-wise for that. That ripple just happens. And that's got 2 different ones doing the same sort of thing with the sawtooth wave. And then the third one has got an amp on it. So if I solo that amp, I'll play the sound without the amp. And with. That's a trick I picked up from a Julian Earle video on techno. It's quite good to take some techno principles and apply them elsewhere, but it gives a really nice sound just mixing that little bit in there. And my second bass sound is more of a sort of rumbly sound. So for this, I've got a noise oscillator and a sawtooth, and then my second one, I've got harmonics and a sawtooth, but I've got the amp going on it again. So I'm going to play that when it happens. And then if I solo that and play, and that's got the noise oscillator on the first one. So the 2 of them together. Sounds a bit like a foghorn actually, but it's got a really cool sound in the context of the track. And both of those are going to the bass bus. And on the bass bus, if I solo that and play the first bit, we have a drum bus. I turn that off. You can hear it's sort of subtle, but sort of not. Adds a little bit of crunch and drive. A little bit of noise, a little bit of analog warmth sort of thing again. Synthesizer wise, I have got a main synth here, which I've got 3 synths doing very, very similar things. The third one has got an octave and a fifth, so if I solo, you can see I'm using the LFO on the positions just to create a little bit of movement. So I've got on the second one, they're moving up and down, but it's slightly different rates. So there's always one of them giving off more harmonics, so it just creates a little bit of movement. And then the third one has got an octave there and a fifth there, just to add a little bit of sort of something, a little bit of top end to the sound. And we're using the standard Ableton arpeggiator. It's got its own echo and then just a little bit of taking the bottom end off of it. The next synth is a deeper one, and I'm using pretty much a similar sort of setup on it. So you can see I've only got 1 oscillator on there. On the second one, very similar, and then I've got a phase sync on the third one on the unison module. But for this, I've also added warming up the lows and screamer on the amp. If I take that off, or that off, they make a really big difference to the sound. It sounds very sort of flat without it. Probably balance that a little bit less actually. Then I kind of sort of cheated because I'm supposed to be using Wavetable for everything, but this is a synth sample. So what I did, just to cut down on CPU, I knew I wanted just one thing running, and that's just the opening part of the synth there. But what I've got on this, I have the straight ARP, which is that sound going through there, and on the second one I'm using the Reason Rack plugin, and I've got the Alligator filter gate and the pulverizer on that just to change the sound. So this opens up as a chain selector. I'm fading one into the other. You hear that going fully wet onto the Alligator. Now the next one is a noise synth, which is actually similar to the hi-hat, but because it's tuned, I put a sub oscillator on that one. They're both 2 tuned white noise. And I've cut down the frequency so you're only getting the high end, so if I turn those off, which is nice, but I only wanted the top end of it playing, so it filled out the top end a little bit. The next one I'm using is, what I've done with this, I've taken 3 wavetables, I'll pop that up, and on each one I've got a different arpeggiator. So I've got exactly the same rate playing, On the first one I've got the up style, the second one converge and diverge, and the third one up down. So the waves are slightly different. You'll notice I've just got that one there. I'm nearer to the sine wave there, and I've got pretty much dual saws but either side of the saw on there. So when you play that, you've got a kind of different pattern going around. It's playing around. It's very, very different to the other one. So if I solo, I'll just hold down command so I can solo the two of them. They're playing exactly the same arpeggio, but it creates this lovely little sort of rhythmic thing going on playing around with them. And my last synth is based on the SH101. Now I did this when I was looking at boards of Canada, and that's because your LFO rate and amount, if I play this, if I increase the amount, how boards of Canada is that? But it adds that little bit of thing which you get with tape, which is it's slightly modulating the pitch of the sound and creates something really, really nice, I think. So I've got controls just to play around with pulse width, but it's basically just a sine wave and a sawtooth wave, and then I've got a blend between the two of them. A bit like the SH101 synth, however, this is a very, very poor attempt at a copy, but it does its job. And then I've got a unison module on there as well. Just mapping the macros, so there's a few different things you can do with it. And all of these synths are going to a synth bus. And the only things I've got on there, I say the only things, I've got the bit warmer saturator preset, because you should probably put that on everything just to give it this analog warmth, and then a 1% on the boost and crunch. So if I solo the synth bus and turn that off, so it just adds a little bit. If I turn it right up, pretty nasty, but it just adds a little bit of something, just that little bit to all the synths. And then for me pads, I've gone very, very similar with a lot of the pads. So I've used the noise unison module. This is just a very, very simple pad, square and a sawtooth, but it's the noise unison that makes it. So if I turn that off, yeah, that's great and all that, but it's just nothing compared to what you get with a noise unison on. Nothing happening on that apart from just that noise unison. And obviously the amplitude envelope is just making it that pad sound. Slower fade in, fade down, and a longer release time on it. And then I'm going to a pad that I've called Vocalesque. That's because I'm using the formants. What I'm doing with this, I've got the chain selector, so I can fade between 1A there, which you'll see has got classic unison very low, but 1B has got the classic unison with a little bit more on it. So exactly the same for 2A and 2B. So if I just play a chord and I grab this, now it's relatively subtle, but it just, you can move it up and down. So you'll see I've got that on here. If I move to there, it's, I need to re-enable automation. I move to there, it's moving up and down erratically because I was just doing it with a push. And it helps to create movement and depth to the sound. So I've got the background pad here, which is pretty much the same, but it's a little bit more extreme on the effects. You notice there it's got 56% on the classic, and on this one 55% on the classic. And I've got just, I didn't actually change the wave shapes, I just moved the position on the wave shape. And if you listen to the difference between this pad and this pad, just moving the position on the wavetable created a hugely different sound. So that's one of the beauties of Wavetable. There's little things you can do that make a big difference to a sound. And I've got a secondary noisy pad here, which, lo and behold, look at that, it uses the unison noise module. So I don't have it on the first one. I've got white noise and I'm on a triangle. But on the second one, we've got two white noises and they've got a noise module on. And that is also, you can hear that sort of humming side to side. That's also going through that noisy echo module. And finally, we've got a tune noise, which gives you a little bit of a rise. So I can show you on here. I'm using quite fast on a bit of a random LFO to run around the noise wavetable on both of them. And I've got filter 1 frequency mapped to envelope 2, so it's gradually getting louder. Now what I probably actually want on this is more of a sine wave thing. So it's more of a so the LFO is on there. I'm going to put the amounts down so it doesn't go too high because it's going a little bit mad. And the reason for that is it's a lot smoother moving around the wavetable with the sine waves. It's just going, so it's more of a noise rise. And it's obviously steeped in reverb. Now, they are all going through a pad bus. And that pad bus has only got a classic chorus straight from the generic patches, and it's got 10%. So if I solo the pad bus and we'll go to somewhere where we've got a few things playing, I'll turn that off. Now it's hardly doing anything, but it's one of those things that helps tie everything together. So that is pretty much everything. I say that it needs a little bit of mixing down. I'm going to get stuck into it and I think try that again. So that is everything that's involved in it. I need to do some mixing down. Like I say, I'm going to try and get that sorted. But yeah, you can use Wavetable to make an entire song, and for ambient I think it's a fantastic synth. It's something you really need to get stuck into, do some experimentation. Hopefully what I've shown you here is whet your appetite and you're able to get stuck into it. I'll leave you with a little bit of this, I suppose, and maybe I'll look wistfully out of the window, who knows. I might need to take my glasses off to do that because that's a bit weird being that they're reading glasses. I look wistfully out the window with my eyes closed. Now I probably just look like I've got something wrong with us. Hey, what can you do? Thank you very much for watching. Oh, do that whole like, subscribe thing because you know that makes us happy and all that sort of thing. And I'll see you again fairly soon, hopefully for the remix.